So, Brad, would you like to hear a little pettiness on Dave Kellett's part? A little petty story from Dave Kellett?
Petty. I am here for the petty. I love petty. It's one of my favorite emotions.
So, as you know, I'm not one that relishes or lives in my pettiness, but every once in a while it rears its head, and I thought you would be delighted to see it because you always enjoy it when it comes up. So, my wife's niece calls me the other day, or rather, the whole series of communications, but it ends up in a FaceTime call, and she's looking for my help because she's in the process of applying for the Rhodes Scholarship. You know, the big scholarship.
Oh, wow.
Many years ago, there was a terrible human being called Cecil Rhodes, started the De Beers Diamond Company, imperialist, racist, terrible human being. But there's a really good scholarship that comes from it called the Rhodes Scholarship. So she's trying for the Rhodes Scholarship. She's really an incredible young woman, and she's smart as heck, and she's funny. And so I was giving her tips because way back in the day, Brad, my university had put me up for the Rhodes Scholarship. I don't know if I ever told you this. And so I got to the state finalist, and this is all leading up to me being a petty. I got to the state finalist, and the way the Rhodes work, there's only 32 given in the United States, and you have to compete in one of 16 regions. So in my case, I could have either gone and competed in California, which has Berkeley and Stanford and UCLA and USC and everything else, or I could have competed in Indiana because that's where Notre Dame was. So I picked Indiana like the smart guy that I was.
Yes.
I was not going to compete in Indiana. Anyway, all this to say, long story short, got through the interview. Interview went fine, I guess. Although the interview, by the way, was a federal judge, a state senator, and the CEO of a now defunct automobile company. So that was my judges for the Rhodes, was these three ridiculously old, accomplished people. Anyway, I did not get it, long story short, right? And I was mad about it for about a year and a half because I was like, darn it, that would have been neat to go to Oxford. Didn't get it. Cut to, I'm helping my niece last week, and I was like, you know what? I haven't looked it up in God knows how many years. I wonder whatever happened to the guy that I lost to, right? You're going to be delighted in this.
I can't wait.
He's now a federal felon, Brad. He's a federal felon. And I am so happy. I smile from ear to ear decades later about the guy that I lost to, and I was like, oh, he's a felon. This is delightful.
Oh my God. That's absolutely beautiful. Because, and I'll tell you why, I have a story that parallels to this, and I didn't think about it until this morning. I'm reading your notes, and I see that you want to talk about this topic. And at Alma College, there was one award higher than all of the others. And I, of course, graduated from Alma with a Bachelor of Fine Arts. It was called the Barlow Trophy. And the Barlow Trophy was that was the big thing at the end of the year. The graduating senior who got the Barlow Trophy, that was the top thing. I had been nominated for the Barlow Trophy. And
of course,
it was the first time in years and years, maybe decades, that an art major had been nominated for the Barlow. So it was a huge deal that I had even been nominated because BFAs never get nominated for this thing. But I had done things. I was at a liberal arts campus and I did everything. I was writing speeches for the poli-sci teacher when he did this presentation at this big conference. I was doing everything. I was really enjoying the liberal arts experience. And of course, I lost, right? So just this morning, I looked up what happened to the guy that won the Barlow Trophy.
Really?
Are you ready for this? Are you ready for this? I'm not going to read his name or anything, but he is an ophthalmologist, retinal surgeon, assistant professor at the University of Blank School of Medicine, author of numerous peer-reviewed research articles and textbook chapters, and principal investigator for several clinical trials. He lists among his greatest accomplishments as climbing Mount Rainier. Dave, I just realized something. I'm the felon. The guy climbed Mount Rainier. He's a retinal surgeon. There's people walking around who can see because of him. I draw cartoons.
I did not see that coming. Oh my goodness. And on that note, I'm going to say hello and welcome everybody to ComicLab, the show about felons and retinal scan folks making comics.
Wrestle that line to the ground. And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Kellen, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. We have a really good show, actually, this week. I'm excited for all the questions that have come in. It's funny when you look at through the questions and you get like, ooh, this one's going to get Brad. Ooh, this one's going to get me. This one's going to get Brad. We both know each other's trigger questions at this point. But I have to say, before we even start the show, I have to give a huge shout out and a thank you to the good folks at Wacom at WACOM.com. By the way, it is interesting to see as the makers of the Wacom One that virtually every cartoonist, when they hear how the word Wacom is pronounced, everyone, myself included many years ago, thought that it was Wacom.com and it's Wacom.com. So if nothing else, this show is doing a service in helping the pronunciation be correctly emanated out into the world. Wacom.com.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, they just had something on their social media helping people remember how to pronounce it correctly. And it made me laugh of all those people that sent us really helpful tweets and emails telling us the correct way to pronounce Wacom. And it's like, no. Long before we decided we were going to cash a check from those people, we decided we'd learn how to pronounce their name on the podcast. But yes, not only are they delightful people to work with, but they are the makers of the Wacom One, which, Dave, as I look into next month, where I am going to be in a Poconos cabin with my in-laws and their families and so forth, I just confirmed with my wife this morning I am going to be bringing my Wacom One along so that I can avoid those people at every turn. I'm going to go into a corner and disappear with my Wacom One. I am kidding, of course, but I am going to take a little bit of time to get some work done during that time. And thank you to the Wacom One, I'm going to be able to do it.
That's right. So to paint that image for everyone, it's going to be a beautiful pastoral in the background, birds chirping, a mother deer chomping on some grass, some ill-fitting Bermuda shorts, zinc oxide on the nose, and Brad Geiger, Wacom One in lap, drawing away, happy as can be.
Happy as a clam. Absolutely.
All right, Brad. Well, our first question today from patreon.com/comiclab comes in and says, hello, sunshines. Brad, we are sunshines.
Yes, we are.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it that we're a sunshine. No. Hi, sunshines. I was wondering how Dave and Brad juggles two separate creative projects such as Sheldon and Drive. Brad, how do you juggle Sheldon and Drive?
We should note, and Brad is in parentheses. I'm wondering how Dave, parentheses, and Brad, end parentheses, juggle two projects. So I think we know which answer they want to hear more importantly than the other.
I love how a show that started off with our pettiness is just steamrolling right along with our pettiness.
We're going to go in full throttle with the petty for the next 60 minutes.
All right, let me get a running start again. I was wondering how Dave and Brad juggles two separate creative projects such as Sheldon and Drive. Do they both require a separation or clearing of one's creative mental space for another? Do you get frustrated if one dominates over the other? And does time management play a large role? Thank you, Brad Geiger. I turned the question to you since you were the highlighted parenthetical. I like to think of the parenthetical as two arms holding you tight as that question was being asked. So Brad, ask the parenthetical.
I like to think of straitjackets the same way, but it doesn't make a whole lot of difference.
So how do you juggle? Because actually, and this is all serious, I say this to very few cartoonists, Brad juggles way more projects than I could handle. and I do a lot. So I'm curious how you handle webcomics.com, Evil Ink After Dark, ComicLab, all the different projects that you do, and that's not even to mention the sort of shorter one-offs that you do time and time again. But how do you juggle it all?
Well, in a certain way, it's a little bit easier because sometimes I'll have an idea or a concept, or I'm just in a certain mood to write one sort of thing, and it doesn't fit another thing. So you kind of learn to go with where your body and your brain is at the time. In other words, there's a time and goodness knows it hasn't happened recently, but there every now and again, like just this last in the winter holidays, Halloween through Christmas, I had tons of ideas for single panel comics. Just boom, boom, boom. I was super lit up about single panel comic ideas, just things that fit perfectly, Halloween themed and Christmas themed. Well, being able to juggle multiple projects means that when those moments come, you just empty your brains right there into your sketchbook, even if it isn't Halloween at the time, even if it's July, you save those suckers because you're going to need them when October rolls around on the calendar, and then you've got them. So in a certain way, it gives you a certain latitude, but then inevitably, time management does come into play because like right now, this week, I'm taking off from updating because I need to work on 2 writing projects, which is the first one is writing the next chapter of Evil Ink. And the other one, as we've talked before, I need to get some firming up of the Drive chapter that I'm working on for you. So I'm going to be doing a lot of writing right now. And what's going to happen is I was thinking about this earlier, Dave. You know those magic tricks where the magician sits down, he's got an empty cup, and he puts the cup down, he waves his magic wand, he lifts the cup, and there's a ball, right? Right. Writing is like that, except you're the one playing the magic trick on yourself. Because what you do with an empty brain, which is the cup, is you go and you sit down wherever you're going to write, you put the cup down, and then you wave your magic wand and you pray and you do whatever else that you do. You lift the cup, and sometimes there's a ball. I'll tell you this, I did it all day, almost all day Friday. I kept lifting the cup. There was no ball. I came downstairs and I told my wife, I said, that's it. I'm done. This is it. I've got no more ideas. I'm a complete failure as a writer. Nothing interesting's ever going to happen again. And she just rolls her eyes and she says, this happens every 3 months. Just do something else for a little while. It'll be okay. You'll lift the cup. There'll be a ball. Don't worry.
Yeah.
How did I get off on that tangent? Oh, so sometimes it doesn't work, but Dave, I want to know, maybe there's something I'm missing. Dave, is there another approach to this that could give me some resolve on those days that I'm lifting the cup and there's no ball?
I want to do a little personal journey of where Brad's question was answered there. So it started off like this. Well, I'll tell you what, one project sort of informs the other one and they kind of help each other out. By the end of that answer, this is what you sounded like. I'm lifting up the cup and there's nothing there. David, there's nothing there. It's all over. Oh, God. It's all been a big sham. Oh, there's nothing here. You went completely 180 on where you started out. It was confidence and like, oh, well, one project feeds into the other. And I find that creativity is its own reward. And then by the end, you're like, oh, God, it's all ash and woe. It's just gnashing of teeth. Oh God, what happened to me, David, throw me a lifeline.
It's the truth. This happens about every 3 months when I'm writing. I go through this. I'm telling you, Dave, it's going to be an interesting show. I'm not in an emotionally secure place right now.
Listen, I need you to be gentle with me. I'm not in a good spot right here. Oh my God, is this what the whole show is going to be? It's like, hey, Brad.
Oh yeah.
Hey, it's Tim Stevens from Des Moines. Quick question. You're always an optimistic and on-the-go kind of creator. How do you maintain your positivity? And then the answer is going to be Brad going, oh, Tim, hell, I don't know, man. I feel like it's all ending. I got nothing left to give, Tim. I'm going to the well, and the well is dry. Oh, Tim, I'm pulling up that bucket, and it's just dust and old dead rats. Oh, God.
Oh, I'm telling you, Jimmy, you're absolutely right. And I'd be happy to have a few dead rats at this point.
It's like, okay, Brad, the next question comes in from Susan from Topeka. She writes in, Brad, how do you maintain your finances? I'll tell you what, Susan, I'm going to be living in a box. That's what it's going to be. My finances are going to be falling apart if I can't get a writing idea. Oh, God. All right. So anyway, now that I've made fun of my friend, let me try to answer this question. So like Brad, I actually feel like, Brad, that there is a parallel to parenting. And tell me if you think this is wrong. You have your first child and your life goes akimbo in those first 6 months. You're like, you're not sleeping. Your time management is just falling through the floor. You don't know how you're going to do it. You're looking at the next 18 years and you're like, how am I even going to get through the next week? Never mind the next 18 years. But you figure it out. You get on, they get him to age 1, age 2, age 3. The second kid comes along. And somehow it's easier as the years go on because you also have the benefit of one kid is helping to raise the other kid and vice versa. Yeah. And they're keeping tabs on each other and they're ratting each other out and they're helping each other's homework, all that sort of stuff, right? And so all of that helps in the overall process of parenting, even though they're two very different projects per se, you know? And so in a sort of similar way, I, like you, find that having two projects means that I always have a receptacle for an idea that I have. So if it doesn't fit into Sheldon, I put it in a drive. If it doesn't fit into drive, I put it into Sheldon. If it doesn't fit in either one, I somehow squeeze it onto ComicLab, as an idea. And so and what's great is they are kind of a mood rising tide because let's talk about Brad's dry spell right now. And right now, Brad's in a dry spell. We all have hit it. That's okay. That happened. Listen to me as a doctor, Brad. I'm going to give you some pills. This happens to everybody. All right,
no, but it was working. I was just listening to your voice. I felt much better. Keep telling me how normal this is. I need to be reminded.
Brad, listen. I want look into my eyes right now. Look into the camera. I want you to know. Listen, Brad. Your mortgage is not dependent on you finding an idea. Brad, those car payments. They're going to make themselves. Brad, you're fine. You're fine. Brad, the food pays for itself. The kids don't need new clothes. None of this is important. You're doing great, Brad. If a dry spell of a couple of weeks, a couple of months, you're going to be great, buddy. I'm sure you've banked up, a half year worth of comics, right? As we've talked about, you're good.
You've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics. I got to go back to work.
Brad just actively wetting himself as I'm talking. No, so here's the thing.
Which is better than passively wetting.
I know. Why did that even get me? The idea of passively wetting your pants versus actively wetting your pants. Oh, such a dumb joke. Oh God. Anyway, oh boy, I'm in the giggles today. I don't know what it is.
My sorrow is your syrup over there. Is just everything over here that's bad is thrilling you. What's going on?
Let's talk about this because part of the question was time management. Part of it was about channeling creativity, and a dry spell actually works within this whole rubric of what we're talking about here, which is when an idea comes for Brad, and it will come. It'll probably come right after this show because you'll be in elevated spirits. Your serotonin's firing, your synapses are firing. So you're going to get an idea within the next hour, right? And we don't know where it's going to land, but you're going to know I've got 3 projects I could apply this to. And so in a way, it makes it easier because then once you're feeling good about your creating again, it kind of opens the sluice gates a little bit of creativity. And you're like, you know what? You're calming down. You're no longer in fight or flight mode, which sometimes happens with writer's block. You're no longer in fight or flight mode. You're relaxed. You're drinking a coffee or you're having that weird cherry soda that you get in Philadelphia that no one ever drinks. I don't know what that thing is. Brad buys Dr. Hidalgo's lugubrious cherry soda, which was made in 1840. I'm always like, what are you drinking? Oh, I'm reading Dr. Hidalgo's lugubrious cherry soda. And I'm like, what is this drink that you're drinking? Anyway.
It amazes me you've never heard of black cherry Wishniak. That really bothers me.
So, Brett, once an idea comes, and it will come within the next hour, you're going to feel relaxed. You're going to calm down with a nice cup of Dr. Hidalgo's lugubrious cherry soda, and you're going to get the second idea and then the third. What I'm saying is having multiple projects actually makes the process of creativity easier. And then time management is admittedly a problem. There's times when I know that I need to produce a drive, but at that same day, I need to produce a Sheldon. It gets a little tricky. And that's when it fails, it's my own lack of foresight and foreplanning. And so I've gotten the trick is you get better over time doing it. I've been doing it now for 20 years. Most days, most weeks, I'm able to make it work. But anyway, now take apart, or put aside your writer's block currently, Brad.
Yeah.
In general, you have found a good balance of having multiple projects versus having just one, right?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, listen, at one time, I was doing Fables, which was a full-page journalism comic for the Philadelphia Daily News.
Oh, my God. That was a lot of work, by the way.
Oh, huge, because I thought I was going to be so smart by having other people write my comic. And it turns out they're not good writers. And I had to rewrite their comic and work twice as hard. So I was doing Fables, Courting Disaster, Evil Inc. as a comic strip. During that time, we were also doing the How to Make Webcomics book, and I was doing a lot of work on that.
And Webcomics Weekly.
And the Webcomics Weekly podcast. There was a lot of stuff going on. And listen, sometimes, yes, everything that Dave just said, yes, time management. There's an idea that fits here, it won't fit there, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes you just have to sit down and say, I'm doing this now, and really just bang it out. And stick with it, and don't let yourself off the hook, and just stay in there. And again, so often what happens is we're so busy looking for the answer that we realize that the answer can be any number of things, and what we're lacking is commitment. And once we commit to something, all right, this story is going to be this. Well, maybe it could be that. Nope. It's going to be this. Well, maybe it could be this other thing. No, it's going to be this. Once you decide that the story is going to be this, now it's a problem to solve, and you can solve problems, right? Yeah, but you got to decide which problem you're going to solve. And that's what you've got to do. That's what you've got to, when I've been in this place in the past, the thing that got me out of it, the thing that I'm going to go right back in that chair and remind me of this afternoon and probably tomorrow, and maybe even the day after that, is you got to decide on something. And a deadline will help you do that. A deadline, that's what working for the newspaper was so good for me. I worked a daily deadline. At some point, you look at the clock and you say, this is the thing I'm doing because I got a deadline. And being doing that, and even giving yourself a deadline, even if you're going to you may not use that deadline to actually publish, but you're going to use that deadline to say, I'm going to get this done by the end of the week. This is what I'm going to do, or whatever your deadline is. Once you move to that, you switch over into problem-solving mode, and then you can actually start to get stuff done. But the longer you spend with your eyes up in the air, looking in the clouds, the longer you're not actually getting anything accomplished. That's the one thing I learned from doing multiple projects is that, the good days, today I'm in the mood to do a webcomics.com article. Today I'm in the mood to do Courting Disaster. That's great, as long as all those happen in order and there's not one that's getting backed up. When that's not happening, then you've got to take the bull by the horns and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to pick something and run with it. What do you think about that approach, Dave?
I love that you probably didn't notice it. It was real subtle, but it creeped back in at the end there. The same confidence started the answer about like, yep, you know what? It's a creative space and they're all working to feed each other. And then at the end of your answer, this is what happened, Brad. And sometimes there's just a little bit of a lockup and you got to make a decision, Brad. You're like talking to yourself, Brad, you just got to make a decision, a creative decision, and it's going to be okay, Brad. Like painful sip of Dr. Hidalgo's lugubrious cherry soda. You just got to do it, Brad. You can do this, big guy. Remember what Coach Parker always used to say in Little League? You just got to take that swing. Another painful sip of Dr. Hidalgo's lugubrious cherry soda. I see it. I want to say, as a friend from 3,000 miles away, I see it through the camera. The pain of your writer's block is killing me through like you're unbuttoning your shirt, for God's sake. You're sweating.
I'm telling you, I had such a hard time yesterday. I no, this was Saturday because I had such a bad day Saturday trying to make this thing happen and trying to decide, which way do I want to take the story. I left on a really significant note on Evil Inc. I've been challenging myself to write better. And the problems with that is that the problems are a lot more complicated now. And here's the other thing. My readers are paying more attention than they used to pay. It was a lot easier when I was doing dumb jokes every week. They're paying more attention and I'm not used to it.
Okay, now I'm going to switch gears. I'm going to give you a boost of confidence. It sounds to me like you're in your, there's a nice sip of Dr. Lugubrious' Hidalgo cherry soda. That's great. A quick break for that. So hold on. So here's I want to give you a quick bit of confidence boost because this is sincere now. You have painted yourself into a corner, which is something that we always advise people to do because it forces you to be on your toes. Right now, you are a high wire artist and you're out in the middle of the wire and everything is activated. All your muscles are activated. Your sweat glands are activated. Your synapses are firing and you're nervous. Can I stick this? Can I get to the other side? Yeah, you will get to the other side. But right now you're in the moment where everything is firing, even though it feels like nothing is moving. You are in the process and that's okay. It's going to click and it's going to click right after the show. I guarantee you an hour of laughing with a friend is the perfect cure for writer's block. You are going to get there because this laughter is going to be the lubricant that will calm your brain down, along with a couple of sips of Dr. Hidalgo's Lugubrious cherry soda, and you're going to feel amazing at the end of the show. Right, let's move on to question.
I can only hope. Your lips to God's ears. I don't know. Listen, Dave. I don't know whether we answered this question asker's problem, but you certainly have helped me with mine. I feel much better.
Well. All right, let's move on to this one. So, Brad, this question comes in from Nathaniel Gold, and Nathaniel writes in, "Hello, B&D. I was wondering if you could share some knowledge on onomatopoeia. For instance, are there hard and fast rules regarding how often to use it, how many different fonts to use in a single strip, or if it is okay to use punctuation? Basically, any info you can share on your philosophy around onomatopoeia would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for doing ComicLab. Listening is my favorite part of the week, and the inspiration and knowledge you provide is the main reason that I finally started my strip in my 40s. Hey, that's fantastic. Thanks again, wonderful. Nathaniel Gold. That's funny, Nathan, because you started your strip in your 40s, and I guess Brad this week will be ending his strips in his 50s. So
in his 50s.
That's great. Do you like how, as a friend, I swing wild vacillations from support to abuse, abuse?
And I'm here for it. I'm like a battered podcast partner over here. I'm just give me some more. So here's the thing. This is one thing. Are there hard and fast rules? No. And let's be honest. If I sat here and spent the next 30 minutes telling you that there were hard and fast rules, you'd spend the next 30 minutes telling me how you're not going to listen to any rules, old man, and I'm going to do it my way. So let's get on the same page here. There are no hard and fast rules. I don't know that I would limit the number of fonts that you can use, although I will say that if you use a whole lot of different fonts, you're going to open the door to having the overall visual effect of your comic look kind of jangled. But there is one thing in all of that I do want to comment on. In other words, I don't care what word you write. I don't care what font you use. I don't care what size you use it at. As long as you're using a little bit of intelligence in all of those things, tune in and think about what you're doing. I will say this. I don't think for 90% of the sound effects, I don't think you need punctuation at all. It's particularly not an exclamation point, because in most cases, your sound effect is going to be at least twice, if not 3 times the size of your dialogue font.
Right.
And when you've got words that are 3 times the size of the other words, the exclamation point is kind of extraneous. You don't need it. Now, every now and again, I can see somebody making a case for a period after a sound effect to do the actual opposite, to downplay the sound effect a little bit, to pull it back. So I could see that. But in most cases, I don't think you need an exclamation point after words that are way bigger than any words in your own comic. What else can we offer Nathaniel for his comic making sound effects?
Well, so just a reminder for the rare few folks that might have forgotten, onomatopoeia in this case is the capturing in letter and word form the sound of a thing, right? And so it's like sizzle is an onomatopoeia of the sizzling of a crackling of a pan or cooking or that kind of thing, right? So for me, like Brad, I think for the most part, if it's done right, it is it doesn't need punctuation, aside from sometimes, as Brad said, the understating of a period at the end, because that sort of brings a weird sort of denouement on the end of it, of like, the opposite of exclamation. Like Brad, I think it's most onomatopoeia is probably going to be best served when it's 2, 3, 4 times the size of your body font. I personally would apply a little zhuzh of its own unique font that matches the onomatopoeia. So you've seen this before. My favorite of all time is the energy of Watterson's onomatopoeia in Calvin and Hobbes. If you look at his splats or his pows or his pow, the font of his pow has the energy of the P, and then the O is a little bit larger and more askew from the P, and then the W is even larger and more askew from the P and the O, and right, and so that pow is actually presenting visually what the onomatopoeia is presenting alphanumerically in terms of showing you what the sound is, right? What you're seeing. And so I'm a big proponent of having the font complement. If it's a splat, depending on the use, you could absolutely go with a wet or somewhat water splattered word of splat. Very appropriate for that kind of thing. You don't want to overdo it. Sometimes it has I don't know how to say it other than 1970s comics feel. I don't know why the 70s were so specific in their overuse of onomatopoeia. Maybe it was the Batman TV show. I don't know, but that one way overdid it. And so a lot of comics, both comic strips and comic books in the 70s, kind of went too far down that path. But when you use it, I personally would say use onomatopoeia outside of any a voice balloon or word balloon or sound effect balloon. I like them standing alone, freestanding in space, as it were. I tend not to let I know Brad is more forgiving of mixing a sound effects font with a body text font. I don't like to mix my my onomatopoeia with my body text. So what I'll do is I'll keep rewriting until someone can make their full statement, and then you have the full onomatopoeia, not embedded within their monologue or whatever it would be.
Yeah.
Brad, any other thoughts about onomatopoeia in a comic strip?
Yeah, there's a few. In fact, as you were talking, I was thinking of a whole lot of other things that come up. First of all,
real quick question. As you were thinking about all those other things, any of them ideas for your current storyline, or how are you going to finish that off?
You son of a gun!
Brad, any solutions? Any ideas about how you're gonna stick that landing?
My heart rate just now finally got under 100 beats a minute. Now it's right back up there again.
You guys are going to hear just a panic sipping of Dr. Hidalgo's lugubrious cherry soda.
Oh my gosh! Let's go back. Please, let's quickly go back to lettering. Something I know something about. When you're doing sound effect lettering, it's really easy to choose one of the Blambot fonts or one of the Comic Craft fonts that is like a display font, and then put that large, right? And then type your words in, and then you're done. If you're feeling like a rock star, maybe you'll tilt it, right? But I think that's like the least amount of work you can put into a sound effect. I will never have a sound effect that has a horizontal bass line. Another one that just goes straight across.
Right.
Because that just doesn't, it looks like another dialogue, right? It doesn't look like a sound effect. So at the very least, you got to tilt it. I don't think for the last several years, I haven't done a sound effect that hasn't been on a curved bass line. I'll take it into Photoshop where you can put that on a curved arc. And now those words will go along a curve. That makes it look a little bit more like what I expect a sound effect to look like, right? It's a little bit, breaks it out. And also, it gives those words kind of different heights. And I would even say that if you want to, you can take that one more step and take that sound effect font. And I think you do this every now and again. take that as the beginnings and then trace over it with your own handwriting or use your own line around that. So you're not actually using that font. You're using that to figure out all your kerning and all the other things. But then you're going to take that and maybe not even sticking to it, by rote, maybe even adding a little bit of flair here and there of your own, draw over that and come up with something that is truly a visual element that fits in your strip. And that's something I'd like to kind of challenge you to do is if you find yourself just using a different font and typing it in, and God help you on a horizontal baseline, push yourself to go further. Make that look like an element, not a word.
Well, and I'd love to build off of this, Brad, because as you were talking, I do sometimes, in fact, a lot of times, trace over a font to create an onomatopoeia because, like you said, you can sort of judge the 10% of it. You modify a descender, or you do a slight curve on an ascender that didn't exist in the original font, or you modulate how they sit on the horizontal plane somewhat, right? So you or modulate even the kerning, so it's tightened and squeezing together a little bit more. All of that is true, but what you also do is by hand drawing over the font, you introduce imperfections. And you introduce your style to a very vectored look, right? And here's where a little bit of philosophy of onomatopoeia comes in. When it's in your style, when it's a version or an extension of your drawing style, what's happening there, and again, this is more philosophy than anybody asked for, is it's sitting in the world of the comic. The sound is in the world of the comic. Whereas we sort of all have the shared lie that the body text is sort of like this quiet little falsehood that we're all agreeing to, that like, well, we can't hear them talk, so we're just going to write it above their heads, right? But something about the onomatopoeia being in your handwriting within the comic makes it within the world itself. Like that sound exists, that the characters could hear it, if that makes sense, Brad.
Yeah.
Where it's not the shared falsehood of there's this bubble of words that's floating above Brad's head. It's this words splat that's happening in Brad's life kind of thing.
And now that brings up a great question for me, Dave. There are when you're writing a sound effect, you actually have two choices. You can use a word or you can use a sound. And I'm going to give you an example. Sizzle is actually an onomatopoeic word. In other words, the word sizzle is supposed to sound like the thing that it's describing, like bam or pow, right? Sizzle. But it's also, unlike bam or pow, sizzle is a word that you use in the English language all the time. I can't believe the sizzle on that steak. Now, you have a choice. You've got a steak being brought up to a table by a waiter or a waitress. They put it on the table and you've got a sound effect. Do you write the word sizzle, sizzle, or do you write PSH, 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 or some other true onomatopoeia? Psh, psh, psh. Because that's a choice that you've got to make sometimes. And sometimes it's like, I'm going to just write sizzle, sizzle because they're going to know what sizzle, sizzle is. But it's really not sizzle, sizzle. That steak is not sitting there going sizzle, sizzle. It's going psh, psh, psh. What do you do?
First of all, you're 1,000% right that is a choice that as a writer we have to make. Just like right now in your writing, you're making excellent choices in how you're proceeding with all of your day-to-day writing. Your choices have been top-notch. So anyway, to answer your question,
I'm telling you, this is borderline cruelty, because I just felt my sweat dry up, and now all of a sudden new sprigs of sweat all over my forehead. I literally felt myself calming down for like 5 seconds there.
I'm having the time of my life. I just want you to know this is so much fun. Anytime I see your resting heart rate like start to drop down, and you're like, all right, I'm okay, I'm safe, I'm in a good place, I'm with a friend. I get back out the Loki daggers. I'm like, here we go, we're going back in.
I can see on the screen my face turning red all over again. I was just turning to what for me is a normal pasty skin tone, and I'm going red all over again.
Well, now let me give you a break so you can take a break with Dr. Hidalgo's Lugubrious Cherry Soda, and I'm gonna answer your actual question now. So you had asked, is it more fun to write sizzle or psip, 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 right? And the obvious answer is that if you enjoy creativity, if you enjoy writing, the chance to come up with your own ridiculous truly onomatopoetic sound or sound effect is one of the best parts of your day. And I will spend a stupid amount of time, like a half an hour, going crang, crong, crang, crong, kring, kring, prang, patang. Like, I'll just sit there, and Beth is like, "Are you okay?" Like, "Oh yeah, I'm just coming up with a word for that I need in Drive." Fatang, fatong, fatong, kong, kong, crang, kang. Just trying to come up with the best possible one.
She thought you were singing scat or something, Kong, kank, a crank, kong. It's like a Sammy Davis take over there.
King, kong, kong, king. So it's truly fun to come up. And when you do get one that is perfect, and when people, like, for example, I had to have a character chewing on something that's coming in an upcoming Drive, and I wrote it as instead of saying crunch, 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 I wrote KRANCH, KRANCH, KRANCH,
Cranch.
and it just felt so much more fun, right? Like, it's just a cranch, 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 because you sort of imagine it's on the side of the cheek. It's like the cheeks puffed out, cranch, cranch, cranch. You can't say cranch without turning your mouth a little bit, and you feel it actually, the word, the cranching of those hard, like, whatever they're chewing.
And plus, visually, it's better because that K and that A, instead of the soft C and the soft U, you've got those angular Ks and As. It's a more aggressive look.
And it was super fun. It was super fun to fontify, if that makes sense, and sort of turn into a fun little word form. Now, let me ask you a question. This is not part of the question asker's question, but I want to ask you something. You and I have been talking about words that are onomatopoetic. True onomatopoeia, right? The sort of pure sound effect word. But then there's a new one that's sort of come about, I want to say, in the last 10 or 15 years of comics, that I would describe as mimetic onomatopoeia. And tell me if this rings true with you. You'll have a character that's just, life has just fallen apart for them. Like, nothing is going right. They're sad. They're out on a hill. It's Brad Geiger trying to write this week, and the character is just nothing's going right. And but instead of writing any sort of sound effect, you put two little asterisks, and in a lowercase font, you just write failure or failed. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's a sort of mimetic onomatopoeia, in that the onomatopoeia, the sound effect, is what their soul is feeling, if that makes sense.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And we see this an awful lot in anime, right?
Yes.
I've seen this tons of times, not only in print manga, but in anime, and it's super effective. So this is really interesting because I love that. I adore it when I see it happening in the wild. I seldom do it because it didn't happen. It didn't happen in the comics that I read growing up when I was in my influential stage.
Right.
I was in my formative years. I love it so much. I can never remember to do it because it wasn't the part of the comics that I read when I was forming my baseline as a cartoonist. But I want to tell you, I love it. I love the effect it has. I love everything about it. I'll be long done with the comic before I even realize that I should have done it.
Well, Drive has, I don't know, 500 pages of story so far, 600, 400, I don't even know. But of those 500 pages, I think I've used, and I don't know what we're going to call this, but for some reason, mimetic onomatopoeia sticks with me. But that use of a self-descriptive word that's describing a moment, a feeling, a situation, I have used it all of twice. And you always want to use it with an understated font. It's always the horizontal plane is slightly askew. It's always almost a tertiary read for whatever that panel is. You never want it to be like failure. You want it to be failure, or sitting. It's got to be real subtle. The two times that I've used it, chef's kiss perfect. I love it. It's such a fun thing to do. You cannot use it a lot. You cannot use it, frankly, with any sort of frequency. It's got to be rare. A certain kind of comic strip can't have it. I don't know that it would fit in Evil Ink, frankly.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I've yet to find a place for it.
In a comic like, I don't know, like a KC Green or a Meredith Grand, perfect. Chef's kiss perfect, right? Yeah. In a lot of manga, chef's kiss perfect, because it has to fit certain things. We've talked about certain comics can only do certain things. And but I would invite you, Brad, as a writer, to try it once. Just sprinkle it in once. It's so fun to use because it's it's like a self-acknowledged hat on top of a hat of like when a character is sitting in a chair and there's just this tiny little font that goes sitting, like there's something kind of fun about that,
No, I know. And like I say, when I see it in the wild, I love it. I love it, but it is so counterintuitive to me to do it. So I think it's just one of those things, but I do agree. It is something that is a nice little bit of seasoning to add to your recipe.
Yeah, but let's put a button on this for Nathaniel's question. And Nathaniel, for me, and I think for Brad, onomatopoeia is one of the pure moments of fun in a comic strip. And so without letting it dominate your writing or frequent use that's too heavy, when it does occur, when it's naturally occurring and naturally needed in the comic strip and you get to do it, I would say have fun with it. Create your own sound effects rather than using an existing word in English. Let the font complement the word that you're inventing. Let the presentation of the font in terms of what horizontal or vertical plane it's on, how the letters are jumbled, how the kerning is overly tight or overly squeezed or overly wet or whatever it is, to match the use of the onomatopoeia itself, and have fun with it. It's one of my favorite things I get to do I honestly will waste a half an hour on it. So good luck with it.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
Well, Dave, it's time for a ComicLab update. A story that we've been following for a little while has been the shipping problems that are being caused by the value-added tax that all got rolling as due to the United Kingdom leaving the European Union. All right. And for a while, it was, if you remember, there was a lot of ups and downs to this. There was a lot of, looks like I got to stop shipping to the UK. And then for a very short time, the UK said, well, unless you're shipping over a certain dollar amount or a certain pound amount, it won't apply to you. At which point we all went back and said, phew, dodged a bullet. I guess we can go back to shipping to the UK. And then just recently, everything turned around again. And it wasn't only the UK, but it was the EU that was saying all of everything coming in has to have a VAT tax applied to it. No matter what the monetary amount was. And we were all back to, well, doggone it, now we've got to not ship to the UK again in a move that, once again, even though they don't want me as an ambassador, I will always be an unofficial Patreon cheerleader because, once again, Patreon has stepped up for those of us who are shipping physical goods. And I'll put a comma there, something that we don't really approve of, something we don't encourage as doing through Patreon, shipping physical goods, unless it's at the high dollar amounts. But if you are, Patreon has you covered. Listen to this. The European Union is introducing new VAT rules starting July 1st. And requiring VAT to be paid on all imports to the EU. This is coming from support.patreon.com. As Patreon is deemed as an online marketplace for digital services, we are responsible for collecting and remitting the tax paid on behalf of all your creators and pledges. In other words, what they're saying is we're already collecting the taxes, we are remitting the taxes, and they give you all of the numbers that you need, the IOSS number or just the VAT number that you're going to need to put on your customs form. They've got all the numbers there, all set up for you. So if you are shipping something under your Patreon, if it's a Patreon reward, Patreon has you covered. They're already collecting the VAT. They're remitting it on your behalf. and they're giving you the numbers that you need to successfully fill out your customs form. It's good news for everyone who are sending high dollar Patreon rewards that are physical. And I just wanted to give you an update on that. It absolutely, because I do have a small handful of backers that get original art every 3 months as part of their reward. And for a while, I was looking at having to cut them out because it was like, I'm not going to be able to do this. And spreading to the rest of the EU was even worse. It was going to take some other people off my list. Thank goodness Patreon has it all figured out. They've got it all handled, and they give you all the numbers you need. Just look it up under support.patreon.com.
That is a great resource. And thank goodness for the sort of standard monthly Patreon payments. They are already figuring out VAT, because that would be immediate hassle for thousands of creators if we had to do that. I have to say, I'm a little less optimistic than Brad about how VAT is impacting my life going forward. Sort of big picture for everyone, with the removal of sort of minimum caps for the EU and the UK. It's made everybody's life that works in cartooning in North America more tricky, good English, has made it trickier because we now have to account for any sale of any value now has to have a VAT applied to that. The basic reason, as we all know, is because COVID has reduced the tax coffers for most major states. And so they're like, we got to get some more taxes in. All right, the VAT, we're raising it. And so the UK made a really complicated system. The EU has a less complicated system for North Americans to import. But what that means for me personally, Brad, is for most of my sales to the UK and the EU, I am genuinely not sure how I'm going to handle it, because the value is just big enough that it matters to me, just small enough where I don't know that I want to take on all this new paperwork with all these new tax authorities. And so I'm still on the fence of like, do I keep selling to the UK and the EU?
It's not the money. The money is fine. I don't have any problems collecting the tax and passing it on to the proper government agencies. The problem is, every time I've tried to sign up to do the system by the books, it has been literally impossible. In other words, I went through, answered all the questions, and got to the end, and it says, "Oh, there's no place for you here in the system." And I did it like 3 different ways. I think I talked about on the show. I wasted hours on the UK website. I want to be within the system. I'm supportive of this 100%. The problem is the red tape is literally impenetrable. It's you can't get through it. It's for people like me. So that's if I end up not shipping to the UK or to the EU on my next Kickstarter, it's going to be because of that.
Yeah, no, just to reiterate, like Brad, I am not an anti-tax person. I believe in the value of myself as a citizen and as a business person in the society that I'm living in, paying all the taxes, and even to our friends in the UK and the EU, I believe in paying their taxes as appropriate. It's the paperwork. As right now, I am obligated to some city taxes, some county taxes, some state taxes, and some federal taxes. I don't mind paying any of them. It's the paperwork that's a pain in the ass. That's what drives me nuts. Time is a more valuable resource to me than the money that I'm bringing in or paying for tax. And so with VAT, especially with the UK, I feel like the UK VAT system was designed by 2 guys in a pub that are like 3 Guinnesses in, and they're like, "Yeah, this will work. This is fine. Put this on the website." Like, I don't know what they're doing, and I love the UK. I lived there for 2 years. I don't know what their VAT system is doing, but that's the problem for me is the paperwork. Like you, it's the red tape, not so much paying the tax, which I philosophically believe in as a good citizen of the world in general. I just can't. The paperwork is killing me. I can't do it.
It's impossible. It's impossible. To the extent that now I know you're running a Kickstarter right now at newdrivebook.com. What do you want to talk about this? Are you shipping to the EU? Are you shipping to the UK? How are you handling that?
So what I did was I created a custom tier on Kickstarter where it will be shipping sort of a version of a drop shipping process. And that drop shipper has all the VAT paperwork. So they're collecting and paying out and filing the VAT. I'm paying them. I've applied the VAT to my price point for their shipping, if that makes sense. Because I weighed the book, got all the measurements for the book, got the package, and then we applied the VAT pre-Kickstarter to each country, if that makes sense. So we know what it is for the UK, we know what it is for the EU, we know what it is for Australia, whatever it is. And that drop shipper is going to apply the VAT paperwork to it. So that was my workaround, was basically, here's the paperwork, you do it, I'm not doing it. And and so basically I'm paying for the service of someone else to do that hassle, because it's a tremendous pain in the ass to me. I can't I can't be bothered, basically. But I don't know going forward, Brad, like the UK is probably worth it's a small percentage of my income every year, but it's probably worth, I don't know, $2,000, $3,000, like not nothing, you know?
Right.
Like you take that out and it's like, it's not going to ruin me, but it's painful to lose it.
It'll
and
hurt.
The EU is probably worth, I don't know, $1,000, maybe $1,500. So if I start to lose all these international customers, because shipping is also an increasing problem as the prices go up, I don't know how I replace that. So anyway, it's an ongoing concern of mine, and I personally don't have a solution. At least Patreon in this case, to Brad's ComicLab update, has a solution, and thank goodness for that. But it's one of those ones that we'll continually be talking about, because VAT, as it is applied globally, is going to be a problem for more and more of us. So anyway, moving on.
Here's a question from a $5 Patreon backer named Tyler, who says, incidentally, talking that he's got a problem with physical rewards on Patreon. And Tyler writes, "Hi, Dad and Babe. And he says, I love spoonerisms. I mail original artwork to patrons on a certain tier every month. I am now slowly running out of my original artwork since I switched to digital drawing.
Oh, no.
How can I pivot these tiers for when I eventually do run out?" So here's one of the reasons, Dave, that we advise against physical rewards is this issue that Tyler's dealing with right now. How do we get out of this jam?
Well, let's put a caveat on this, that both Brad and myself have physical rewards on certain, if not annualized, calendarized systems. Mine for Sheldon is annualized. Brad's, I think, is quarterly, right? For payments, they get original art.
Every 3 months, so that's quarterly, yep.
And for Sheldon, they get it annually. And I will tell you, I don't think that either Brad nor I, despite the fact that it generates huge amounts of Patreon support, I don't know that we necessarily promote that as the best idea. I don't know that I would tell anyone, do this. If anything, it has caused a hassle in my life in terms of this weird calendaring that I have to keep track of. So that being said, now that you're in this process of having a reward tier where the item is running out, you are about to come to the end of your road with original art, the way I would do it is, there are ways to grandfather out tiers on Patreon. So you can obviously close off any new people subscribing or applying for that tier or that reward on Patreon. And then when you're maybe about 3 months out from running out of original art, I would elect to email everyone and say, hey, everybody, we got 3 more months on this tier. After that, we're going to do blank. And then that becomes the next question for Brad and I, is how to describe for you what you do next in terms of maybe removing or changing that tier. And Brad, why don't you take it from there?
Well, I'm just going to back up just for a second, because the process for doing what Dave's talking about, in other words, grandfathering out, is called unpublishing. All right. And if you want to find out the process for doing this on Patreon, the search you're going to want to put into support.patreon.com is unpublish. And basically what that does is... By
the way, thank you for that correction in terms of using the right term. Brad is always the best with wordplay and words on here. He always knows just what words to apply right after another. That whole writing process for Brad is...
You might even say he's a good writer.
You might even say he's a good writer, and he's always got the right answer when it comes to words and the English language. So that's why I turn to Brad when I need the right word at the right time to come in and save the day. I look to Brad Geiger. So thank you for teaching me about unpublished.
If only I could unpublish this podcast. Oh my gosh. So what you want to do is unpublish. And what this process does, it keeps the people that you've got at that tier, but it makes it invisible to anybody else. So it keeps the problem from getting worse. And then you obviously replace that with a different tier that's maybe at the same level. And then, of course, when that original art does run out, you're going to eventually have to tell those people who are on the unpublished tier that they're going to have to move on to another tier, or else they're just not going to get rewards at this tier. And that's kind of dicey to do. This is, and by the way, this is scalability problems. When we talk about the scalability of physical reward on Patreon, this is one of those things. There's just not enough of the reward to go around. Your next step is, as Dave mentioned, now you got to come up with something else. Okay. And there are any number of things that you might want to come up with. Inevitably, you're going to have some people that are a little bit disappointed with whatever replacement that is. You're probably going to lose some Patreon backers at that level, or if it's multiple levels, you're going to lose them. But you're just going to have to replace it with something that is scalable, something that you can do at higher and higher quantities as it gets more popular. And take your lumps and move on. It's not the end of the world. You're not fishing from a limited pond. You're fishing from a unlimited, infinite pond. So if you lose a couple Patreon backers, you'll get them back. You'll replace them with somebody else. What do you think, Dave? Is that maybe a good way to look at this?
Absolutely. Like, you will absolutely be sad that it's over in terms of that sweet money from original art. But you should also be sort of happy that it happened, right? Like, you were able to squeeze whatever you were able to squeeze out of that original art. It helped support the career up until this point. And so now you move on. And like Brad said, scalability is the problem here. And so obviously you're going to want to go with digital rewards of some kind, ebooks, special collections of ebooks. Sometimes even reworking not the actual drawing or the art, but reworking the style of collection. So you bring together, as Brad does geniusly, and sometimes I do, thematic comics. You bring those together and you put that out as an ebook for folks. But digital is the way you're going to want to go because it is scalable. It's repeatable. It's easy for folks to get. Versus all the logistical problems of mailing out original art. So yeah, you're obviously going to be sad that that's over. But again, just remember that it got you to a certain point. It brought in the money that it could bring in, and now it's time to move on to a digital and scalable tier.
So let's pitch some ideas for Tyler. If you had to replace an original art tier, what would your go-to be? Do you have any? I mean, do you want to try and come up with some suggestions for Tyler? What would you suggest Tyler maybe replace this with?
Well, so easy ones to do would be if you have exclusive live drawing sessions where you're drawing your comic anyway. It's already work that's in the sort of hopper, if you know what I mean. And it's got to get done. Turning on cameras and being able to entertain patrons on an exclusive level is always a delight. People always want more of you, but some people aren't comfortable with live drawing, and that's fine. I totally get that. That's not the expectation when you go to become a cartoonist, that you have to be performative. So if that's not for you, I would strongly suggest something that both Brad and I have done, which is thematic collections of comic strips, digital ones. So I have done comics that are thematically collected by coffee, by literature, by pug humor, by pop culture humor. Brad's done all sorts of ones on all sorts of themes and proclivities. And that was the most delicate use of proclivities I've ever used, I think.
And you're talking about collecting them into ebooks, right?
Yes.
Not print collections, but ebooks.
No.
Yeah.
And I would never, this is keeping in mind, you're not reworking anything. You're not redrawing anything. You're not rewriting anything. You're just collecting it into thematic collections of this or that topic. And then I think, if you wanted to, again, this is not scalable and it gives you more standalone work, you could offer original sketches, which is kind of a version of what Brad does sometimes, which is original in terms of custom commissions. Brad, is what I was getting at.
Well, that was actually going to be my go-to, and I would say.
Oh, well, then you talk. Go ahead, jump in on that one. Talk about that.
Yeah. I would try to replace that with digital commissions, which is a full-on drawing that you do for this person. I would not try to do those every month. In fact, I'd have a digital commission level, but it's every 2 months. And so basically I've got every other month the person gets a commission, and then I've capped it at a level where
Right.
I know I can't do any more commissions than that during a given month. The nice thing there is that it becomes Patreon content, and then you do a
Absolutely.
commission for the person, you give them a low res and a high res, and then you're kind of out of it.
And what's great for the way Brad structured it is the commission goes to the person. Great. They're happy. It then, I think a week or two later, goes publicly to Patreon. They're happy. Oh, wow. It's kind of an exclusive they're seeing on Patreon. And then 6 to 12 to 18 months after that, it gets collected into a book form. Oh, my God. It's amazing. So Brad has 3 purposes for that one commission. So it's a version of what we say all the time, draw it once, get paid for it multiple ways. Brad, quote unquote, got paid for it 3 different ways there for that same drawing. But here's a question that I wanted to ask you, Brad, that I don't know that maybe you've covered this before. How scalable is that for you in terms of time management? How many commissions do you accept a month? How many patrons are at that level a month? And how many do you wish you could set it to versus where you are?
Oh, well, listen, I the cap is, I think, at 8 people. There's only 8 people who I can have at that level. So it's not very scalable at all.
And do you have them at 4 and 4? So they go 1, 4, gets them in May, the next 4 get them in June. Is that the way it works?
Yep.
Okay.
And so what I've got to do, it's a little bit delicate, because for a while there it was like 5 and 3, and it was leaning towards like 6 and 2. Mm-hmm. And then what happens, like if somebody drops out, generally if I just stay quiet, because it's not like they're checking every day to see if it's opened, right? If I stay quiet, I can kind of go towards the next month and then make the announcement. Hey, there's an opening at this level if you're interested. Once I make the announcement, that level has not stayed open for more than like 48 hours. Because as soon as it's open, there's somebody that wants in, right?
Wow, great.
But in terms of scalability, you're absolutely right. It is not scalable for me past like 8 people at that level. It's just, I wouldn't be able to keep up.
Can I make a comparison here? Because this is interesting. Basically, you have created a process where you kind of do an extra drawing every week. 1 week gets you one extra drawing that's not a comic strip. And what's interesting is kind of in terms of convergent creativity, I do 1 extra drawing every week that I put up on eBay. And that generates somewhere between $150, $300, right? Most often in the $150, $250 range. And so that's my extra little tidbit every week to generate income. You do 1 extra little tidbit every week. I just find it interesting that you and I have both found a similar process of creating 1 extra drawing for money that we use multiple ways. I use those eBay drawings in the back of my drive books. And it's interesting that I'm just, appropriate to nothing. It's interesting that we both found that same process, but applied different ways. So it's interesting to me.
Yeah, I stand by it strongly. In other words, you've got to be very careful in terms of not overcommitting, but it does such great things, not only for having a commission level at that level that people are willing to do, but just having that extra content that you can publish as a Patreon exclusive is really, really powerful stuff. I love being able to do it, you know?
No, you have definitely hit a gold mine with that. I don't know how much of that is Brad specific in the sense, or at least title specific for Evil Inc. After Dark. I don't know that, say, Sheldon as a comic strip would ever have a commission list.
No, I think, well, I don't know, but if you're getting like upwards of $100 to $300 for those eBay that you're putting them up on, I'd say you keep doing that. You've got the right idea.
Yeah, it's nice because not every single one can be used in a book, but most of them can. And so for me, there's a distributed value across all of them is like, oh yeah, these are worth doing, because also between you, me, and the wall, I'm drawing them while I'm doing some other activity. I'm watching a movie or I'm taking a break and sketching. And then, you basically firm up a sketch and make it final illustration ready. So they're not work per se. They're more fun drawings. And often those the funner they are, the more they get on eBay. So anyway, but I wish you luck on this, Tyler. It's a unique problem that all of us face with Patreon, is the scalability of our rewards. And so I think Brad's got some good solutions. Any other possibilities, Brad, that you wanted to mention before we wrap it up?
The only possibility I've got is that it might just be possible that we've reached a scalability issue here on ComicLab. We've been talking for well over an hour, and I think it's time for me to say that you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Brad, I got to tell you, you stuck that landing as a writer. I feel nothing but optimism for your writing session after this show.
I've used up all my good stuff.
Any man who can turn that phrase, you're like an Australian sheepdog, just bringing them in, closing the gate with your nose. You've got it. You landed it. Your hosts have been my friend, Brad Geiger, the creme de la creme of writers who can do no wrong, who is an endless font of ideas and solutions. He's the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com, which has amazing storylines coming up in the next couple weeks, by the way. You're going to love them.
And my black-hearted friend Dave Kellett, co-director of Strip, the comics documentary, and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com, and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song was used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media. And of course, we give a shout out and a thanks to our friends Wacom over at wacom.com, the makers of the Wacom One, which both Brad and I use and love and recommend.
And if you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. You may hear your review featured on a future episode.
And I don't know that we have gotten any good reviews lately. So jump on over to Apple Podcasts and do a quick 5-star review and a few kind words. It helps us and helps the show, so we would appreciate that. Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/ComicLab. So we'll go ahead and say that like Brad's writing process this week.
We here at Dr. Hidalgo's Lugubrious Cherry Soda believe in a soda that not only encourages the body, but the mind. When you drink Dr. Hidalgo's, you find all the lugubriousness proceeding into your writing, your painting, your sculpting, your ballet. So have a delicious cup of Dr. Hidalgo's Lugubrious Cherry Soda.
And as always, thank you for your support.
Nah.
That was a Bartles and James callback that nobody's going to remember from the 1980s.